So here is the finished project. It is about 66 inches long and about 43 inches wide. So there was some shrinkage in the dryer, but you can see all 6 colors go along the warp and the weft. So they intersect in the 2 different spots. And it kind of created that diagonal checker pattern. And you can really see how beautiful all of these colors played along. I actually just really love this pink, the aqua. Surprisingly, the hibiscus color, I thought it looked really sharp with every single one of these colors. And I wouldn't have imagined it would look so sharp with every single one, but it did. And so did the pistachio. Like, that green really just was popping. I mean, all the other colors, I still think they're gorgeous, but I'm going to say the hibiscus and the pistachio might actually be my favorites, which I didn't expect when I started this. I really didn't. But the blanket came out absolutely gorgeous. I'm very happy with it. Pop quiz, can you see the seam? All right, so now that you've seen the revealed blanket, I'm going to actually just give you some tips for double weave that I found absolutely invaluable and or I learned because I made the mistake while weaving. So first things first, I will always like to set up one treadle that lifts the entire top layer off of the bottom layer. If I'm going to do multiple layers, I would probably have a treadle for each layer to separate it entirely from the other layers. And the reason for that is quite simple. Whenever I'm tucking in my thread colors, I need to make sure I didn't accidentally mix it between 2 layers. And also when I'm hem stitching, I want to have those layers separated for when I'm hem stitching each layer. I don't want to accidentally pin the layers together. So that is something I will say is absolutely invaluable, having that treadle that separates the layers, period. So my second tip is going to be when you're actually threading the project. So I made the mistake of starting from the corner that was not connected. So the 2 separate selvages and then working towards the part that was going to connect. So the problem with that is I ended up being a little off on my pattern threads. So I had to make an adjustment towards the center here. You'll notice that the design in the center is a little bit different because of that. I have a smaller section here that has the squiggles and then a smaller section on both sides of that particular pattern. And the reason, see this little gap is a little bit closer versus other parts of the blanket. Now, this isn't a big deal to me, but if you were working on a project that you really wanted everything centered, the best way to get that centered is going to be making sure you start at the fold. So if you are connecting it on the left side, start threading the pattern on the left side. That way, when you get to the 2 end selvages, you will end at the exact same part of the pattern. So just keep that in mind. I was connecting on the right side, so I should have started on the right, but I did not. My next tip is when it comes to your hem stitching. I'm going to tell you, start on the side of the open or the separate selvage. So what will be the ends of your fabric, which for this particular work should have been on the hibiscus and the licorice end, because those were going to be my separate selvages. So start your hem stitch there, because that way you can actually loop around and hem stitch the entire blanket in one go. Now, the way I measured it is I went to the front and I made 6 passes of the entire width of one section because I was doing a full double weave, so it was double the width. Normally I would measure out 3 lengths, so I did 6 because that's going to be 3 lengths of the entire project, and I easily made it over the entire project. So With the front, when you're hem stitching, it's going to be pretty easy. You're going to hem stitch across, and then you're just going to sit on the floor and hem stitch the bottom. And the entire time, you're going to hold that treadle that separates the layers, and that's going to make it a lot more convenient. When you get to the end, obviously you can't sit under the loom because you have the entire cloth blocking where you would reach to hem stitch the bottom. What I did for that was quite simple. On the top, I started at the end selvage of the top layer, and I hem stitched across while holding that treadle the entire time to make sure I don't pick up the bottom layer. And then when I got to the edge, I just cut the top layer and I peeled it back and I hem stitched across again all the way to the end. And it came out very clean. It came out very nice. And that's something I will be continuing to do in the future because I like how well it came out. So those are kind of my big tips for working on a double weave project. It's very simple. What you're going to do is you're going to, when you thread it, thread from the connecting side. When you set up your treadles, make sure one separates all your layers, and always start your hem stitch on the separate ends. And these little things are going to give you a lot of success in your next double weave. I will also just note, you don't need to hyper focus on your selvage. Something that keeps a lot of people from doing a double weave is they're afraid of having the seam in the center show. So when I weave, my take-in on the edges is generally about 1/4 or 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch. And it's not a lot. And I noticed as I was weaving, I was getting a little worried about my selvages. But as I wound onto the back beam, my selvages on the layer, the bottom layer with the hibiscus, were coming out cleaner. See how straight that is? Than the selvages I could see with this licorice. You can see that's a lot more uneven. And it's because I kept being so worried about selvage, I just kept pulling it, which was creating a less even tension. So even if the take-in was just a little bit more on that bottom layer, it was a consistent amount that was being taken in. And the only thing I really did different on the center, where the seam actually isn't very noticeable. Maybe you could see it because I did it at a direct color change. But the seam isn't really that noticeable because I occasionally, when the two layers were connecting, would just beat it with an open beat to make sure that the layer went all the way around smoothly. And I would only adjust it when I saw that it was actually pulling in or if I had a bubble. And whenever that happened, I would literally open the shed, pull a string out, and just beat it gently until I could see that the shed was completely open and it was beating evenly. I would not worry about it any further than that. So if you're afraid of your selvages being an issue and you're going to have this big seam, I wouldn't be so worried. I think it's overblown how much you have to be conscious about that. I think if you just relax a little bit, your selvage will come out a lot neater. And even if there is a seam, if it's a very consistent seam, because you're beating at the same consistency, because you're not worried about it, you're just doing what feels natural, the seam will look intentional. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. As I just said, I think it's overblown. Those are my tips for double weave. And I hope you guys start a double weave project. And also let me know what project you plan to do next. And I look forward to doing some more projects with you. Bye.